Okay, I guess good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondent Club of Japan. My name is Piero Emilia. I'm today's press conference moderator. And our guest today is Mr. Scott McIntyre, I guess, right? He's a colleague, he's a freelance journalist from Australia, expert on football, I'm told. But he's not here today to talk about neither sports or neither any professional activities. He's here to talk about his case, which is just one among many, of parental abductions. I mean, children abduction. This is a term that the Japanese parliament and government doesn't like to be used, but actually this is what is happening. You know, in Europe, we already, some of us who are concerned with the issue have already heard about the term PAS, which is Parental Alienation Syndrome. This is a psychological issue that concerns thousands of parents that have lost contact unwillingly of their kids, and among them 2,000 have committed suicide. In Italy, there are 200 parents, most of them fathers, that have suicided themselves because they cannot see their kids anymore. Now, in Japan, this is not yet the case, although the suicide rate is very high, because of the cultural issue. I think that everybody knows here that the issue is not just Scott or many others. We have here Tommaso and Vincent, who have been our guests in the past for similar cases. Because culture here in Japan is not yet mature enough to understand that a joint custody is probably the best solution, and especially that there is a right of children to have access to both parents. This is the main issue. I hope that our guest today will comment on this. To see the kids is not only the right of the mother or of the father, it's a right recognized by International Covenant on Children's Rights, by the UN, to see both parents. And this is something that neither the Japanese culture, neither the parliament, neither the Japanese judiciary has yet recognized formally and totally. So the case of Scott has also some kind of connection with the most famous or infamous case recently on the press, Mr. Gon, because he has been also arrested and detained for several days, luckily, not months, but he has also something to say about the way of detention, and I think his case could help us to focus on one of the most obscure issues of Japan, the judiciary system. So, without any more delay, I will give the mic to Scott. First of all, I would also like to introduce Mr. Honorable Kishida Seichi. Can you please stand up? He's an LDP member of the parliament who has been very vocal and very active in this issue. So if any of our colleagues wants to have a chat with him after the press conference, he is willing to accept questions and anything. Yokozo. Okay, Scott, go ahead.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. You said everything I wanted to say, so maybe we can finish. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming, especially for Mr. Kushida as well, who's been a very vocal advocate in the Japanese government for this issue. I stand here as a member of what we call the Left Behind Parents, the LBP. This is a group I never wanted to belong to. I feel like someone who's going through Alcoholics Anonymous or someone with a gambling addiction who's being surrounded by friends that you never want to have as friends, but it's a great thing to have a community of people supporting you through this situation, because there are an estimated 100,000 children in Japan every year who are removed and denied access to a parent, which is a fundamental human right of children to be with their parents, and for parents to be with their children. This is a right that's enshrined in international treaties and obligations that Japan has ratified, which specifically state at both Article 9 and Article 35 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, that kidnapping and abduction shall be prohibited, and that children have the right to maintain regular contact with both parents. Furthermore, kidnapping and abduction is outlawed and illegal in Japan under Item 224 of the Japanese Penal Code, which also says that kidnapping of minors is a crime. There are so many problems with this. The police routinely refuse to investigate any of these issues. In my case, personally, I went more than a dozen times to the police with evidence and documentation relating to what I believe to be the kidnapping and abduction of my children. Nothing was done. Nothing was done in the school that my children were removed from. To date, nothing has been done in the family court, despite repeated requests to have any form of information about my children. It's almost 250 days since I've spoken to, since I've heard from or had any meaningful information whatsoever about my children. I sit here today, I don't know if my children are alive, I don't know if they're dead, I don't know anything about their education, I don't know if they're in Japan, I don't know if they're abroad. And yeah, as a parent, it's heartbreaking, but we stand here, the parents, as voices for our children who don't have voices of their own in this case. And it's a very important point, what Pio mentioned about parental alienation, which is an issue that in many countries is not recognized fully, but certainly in Japan it's not. I've raised this repeatedly. In my case, the damage that is being done to children that are separated from their parents. There's been multiple international studies that have shown long-term health damage, educational disadvantage, employment disadvantage, as you said, increased the suicide rates, not just of the parents, but of the children as they grow up as well. So in Japan's case, where you have a declining birth rate, what damage and what impact is this doing to the future of Japan and Japanese children? Because the ones that are talking about this issue are the foreigners, but we are the ones in many ways that are impacted the least by this situation. 90% of these cases are Japanese children being abducted and being kidnapped by Japanese parents. And what we want to do is give a voice to everybody, because this is an issue that doesn't affect men or women, it doesn't affect foreigners or Japanese, it doesn't discriminate. When children are being removed from parents, they're being removed in any situation and any form. And it's not, I think it's not the mark of a tolerant modern society to have a system in place that encourages the abduction of children. We know in many cases that lawyers have been responsible in organizing and advising how to conduct kidnappings and abductions. They receive fees and percentages from any division of assets after a divorce, and this encourages parents who may not have even thought about the idea of abducting their children to go ahead and do it, because lawyers are making money off this, judges are profiting off this industry, politicians are involved in this. This is an issue that affects every aspect of Japanese society. And the answer, the solution to fix this is simple, and this is what we thank Kushida-san for his work in the Diet, is we just simply need to change the law from one of sole custody to one of joint custody, and then the kidnappings and the abductions of children stop tomorrow. And that's a great benefit for parents, it's a great benefit for children, but just as important, it's a great benefit for Japanese society. That children can grow up knowing the love and support of both parents, can have equal educational, employment opportunities going forward, and it's a great benefit to Japanese society. There's several complaints that have been made. There was a UN complaint submitted last year, conducted by the same legal firm in France that did the Gong case as well. That hearing, I believe, is going to be heard next month in the United Nations. So there's a lot of international pressure happening. We know the French leader Macron, the Italian President Conte, and other governments have spoken directly with the Japanese leadership, saying it's not good enough, because in our case, the foreign parents, what's also happening is the children are being removed from their extended family. So my parents who are here today haven't seen or heard from their grandchildren also for 250 days. My children, I don't know if they are speaking English anymore. So the children have been removed from their culture, from their history, from their language, and from their background. And this is all because Japan refuses to do what every other G20 nation has done and implement a system of joint custody. It's a basic and fundamental human right. We're not asking for revolutionary change. We're just asking for the rights of children to be protected as they are in most other civilized nations. And this issue is bringing, in my opinion, is bringing shame to Japan, because it's not good enough that in one way what we can consider the police are not working, the government is not working, the judicial system is not working. It's easy to make an analysis that these kidnappings are state-sponsored kidnappings. And this is not good enough, and this brings shame and dishonor on Japan, that they allow these kidnappings and abductions to continue. So what we want to call for is a continued discussion that Kushida and Kara-san and other politicians have been having, brave politicians, because these people are being attacked mercilessly by people in Japan to dare to raise the idea that children should have access to both parents, for what we understand from our countries as a fundamental human rights of the children. So this is only going to change when Japanese people understand what's happening, and Japanese parents speak out as well, because like I said, it's 90%. The Japanese parents are the victims, and Japanese children are the victims. And we as people who love Japan and who've come to Japan to contribute to Japanese society, we don't want to see the future generation of Japan suffering through these issues as well. And the way to change everything, and for me to never have to be here, and whoever comes after me to never have to be here ever again, is to implement a system of joint custody. And as soon as that's happened, the kidnappings are immediately finished. So yeah, I'm happy to talk any questions about that, or any questions about the detention in Kosuge, where I was held initially in Takkaido, and then at Kosuge, the same facility where Carlos Ghosn was held, the same facility where Japanese prisoners are executed. Also an issue that we should raise as well. Another human rights concern. Nobody should be executed, and I was subject in that situation, the same as Carlos Ghosn was, to the use of 24-hour light, which is classified by both the United Nations and Amnesty International as a method of torture. On 3 separate occasions, I asked to make a formal complaint that I was being tortured, and I was told that nothing would be done, and if I complained further, I would be placed in either solitary confinement or a straitjacket. So these are also not measures or marks of a modern civilized nation, and also bring shame on the nation of Japan, and should be immediately ended, not just for myself or for Carlos Ghosn, but for the 95% of detainees and prisoners who are Japanese and who also don't have a voice in this issue. Thank you.
So you were not in isolation?
I was not in isolation, but I was threatened with isolation should I keep complaining.
Okay, thanks, Scott, for very compact presentation. The floor is now open. We are now opening to the floor. Sorry. So please raise your hand. I would ask first member of the press, of the working press, to raise their hands and make questions at the microphone, and state your name and affiliation if you have one.
Hey, thank you, Scott. It's Ran Kim from Reuters. Can you tell us a little bit about how much support, if any, you've gotten from the Australian Embassy?
So, as I said, this is an issue that impacts all nations. we're aware, we have a collection of Australian parents that have been working to try and raise this issue in Australia, including, and it's very important to stress that people have the perception that this is just something that affects foreign fathers, but we have mothers also in the group who've had children kidnapped and abducted by Japanese fathers. And we've been trying to raise this issue for a long time in Australia. Initially, we had we had what you could term emotional support from the embassy, but they claimed that they couldn't do much more than that. Since my arrest and detention, they've been very good. They came to visit me and have offered support. But myself and other parents last year wrote directly to the Foreign Affairs Minister and the Prime Minister of Australia. My parents did likewise. Other members of the LBP community in Australia did the same, and we've received not a single response, and in fact haven't to this point, not a single response from anyone within the Department of Foreign Affairs or the Prime Minister's office, which is, I'm sure many people here are aware that there was an issue in North Korea last year where there was a student who disappeared in Pyongyang. And the embassy in Tokyo, the embassy in Beijing, and Department of Foreign Affairs in Australia bent over backwards to secure the release of that person. Australia's been vocal in the past in terms of issues on whaling, for example, that they've had a concern with Japan. So what we want is Australia to follow the lead of what France has done, what Italy has done, and what other nations has done, and to raise this as an issue. I keep saying, imagine if there was a school bus of Australian children on a holiday in some other country and they were kidnapped or abducted. This would be a huge issue that would not go away. And our cases are no different. In almost all of our cases, and we have a very conservative estimate of at least 100 Australian children in the past decade. It's just Australian children have been abducted either to or within Japan. And I want to ask the Australian government if they think that's okay. These are 100 Australian citizens who are being denied their history, their language, their culture, and their identity. And I think many people in Australia are not happy if they think at least 100 children have been abducted with the support of what there's a very good belief to say is state-sponsored abduction. I think it's not acceptable, and I think that the Australian government should stand up for the rights of the children. Of course, we are suffering, the families are suffering, but we are just a conduit and a voice for the children who don't have a voice in this issue. And yeah, of course, we want the Australian government to stand with other foreign governments together and say directly to the leadership of Japan that Japan's international reputation is being damaged. This is a country that's holding a major sporting event this year. Already we've heard Carlos Ghosn say no foreigner should ever visit Japan. I'm not going this far, but you can understand why. And the point has been made by European parents as well in their discussions with the European Parliament. Yep. Why should European nations give visas to Japanese people to visit their country when Japan is abducting and kidnapping our children with impunity and nothing is happening? Why should foreign nations open trade relations with Japan, diplomatic relations to Japan? Why? Why should Japanese people be afforded the luxury to travel and move within our countries when they're kidnapping and abducting our children with nothing happening? And this is not an attack on Japan, because I've lived here for a while and we all love and respect Japan, and the vast majority of Japanese people are wonderful people, and when you explain these issues to people who don't understand them, they're shocked. The Japanese people are shocked by this as well, because they don't know it's happening. Yep. So what we want is the police to do their job. The laws are in place. Investigate the abduction of children. Do your job. In my case, okay, I did 45 days detention for 1 minute, just going to the lobby of my parents-in-law apartment to try and see if my children were safe after a natural disaster. I was handcuffed. I was put in the same cell, 4x3 tatami cell. I was moved on multiple occasions. I shared a cell with several murderers, with a rapist, with a pedophile, with a violent armed robber, with various yakuza, and assorted other less normal members of Japanese society. I think this is unusual for someone who's on a trespassing charge to be put in these kind of situations. And this is the image that Japan is portraying to the world ahead of hosting the Olympics. That they're allowing abductions of children to happen. And they're allowing what I believe, and the United Nations and Amnesty International believes, is torture. For people to be tortured. Their own people are being tortured in detention. Foreigners are being tortured in detention. You can understand why. If I had $20 million and a private jet and a big drum case, I would be out to Lebanon as well. Because why you want to stay here and suffer under these conditions?
Yeah, I may just chime in on this. In Europe, as far as I know, there is a specific treaty, international treaty, that bans suspects, at the level of suspects, to be detained in the same cell with other heinous crime suspects. For example, in Italy, if you are arrested for trespassing, there is no way that you are put on the same jail with a murder suspect or a pedophile or whatever. So this itself, it's a very strange way of doing. But actually, the Japanese government is denying this, because I remember many years ago we had another case, and the Justice Ministry denied that in detention cells they are putting together suspects of different crimes. So that is something that it may be worth of investigating from the press point of view.
Because people have no idea of these conditions. So you're only allowed to wash your clothes once or twice a week. You're only allowed to shower or bathe 2 times a week. In the first place, I was only allowed to shower 3 times in a fortnight. The second place, only twice a week. There's no visitors over the New Year period. These rooms accommodate up to 7 people at a time. So each person has just one single tatami mat. There's a toilet with an open door and window, so you can see everything that's going on. And I tell you, there was a lot of things going on in those toilets that you don't want to know about. And the place is full of, my friends were trying to bring me certain books. They had a little rip and tear in the cover. This was not acceptable, but the place is full of pornography. And, it's okay to
What about the food?
If I never have to eat cold rice or miso again, I'm happy. It's not... it's not going to win any Michelin awards, but it's, I didn't go hungry. I lost a lot of weight, but... the food is not an issue, but the fact is that you're being confined in such a small space. You're only allowed 30 minutes exercise per day. In the first place, in the local police cell I was in, I was not allowed to exercise daily as well. And when I complained about that, also you're threatened with isolation and with a straight jacket. To the first place, I had maybe 5 minutes a day maximum, and that was only because I was complaining. In Kosoge, where Carlos Ghosn was held, we were not permitted to stand up in the cell, so you had to sit at a table. You're not allowed to lean against a wall, so that was 23 and a half hours a day of sitting on the floor.
You cannot lie down?
You can lie down for a 2-hour nap period in the afternoon, and of course you can lie down at night, but during the day, outside of the 2-hour nap period, you must remain seated at the desk. And over the 9 days of the New Year period I was held, there was no exercise. So for the 9 days of New Year, it was 24 hours a day, either lying asleep or sitting on the floor. And if you dared...
When you say sitting, you mean sitting Western style on a chair, or...
No, you sit with either Caesar or with a crossed on a tatami, at a desk maybe half the size of this.
Okay. I hope never to be detained. Yeah. Fred, please.
Fred Varco, freelance. Just following on to what you said already, the simple question would be, do you see changes happening? And just supporting that, what have you seen any support from, for example, Japanese parent organizations, other Japanese politicians, you've mentioned that in passing, Japanese media, who obviously have turned out in force today, NGOs, or the judiciary? Can you just expand on that?
On change, We have to hope that there's going to be change, but I'm sure some people were aware that there was a class action launched last year to try and force Japan to follow the various UN treaties that they're obliged to do so, when my understanding of the decision was basically that they said we don't have to follow any of those, which is a little bit unusual. There's a second class action that's being launched. I believe that will be formally announced next month. And which I believe is also being done on behalf of the children. So basically holding the Japanese government responsible for any past and any future educational, social, physical, mental employment disadvantages that children who've been removed from their parents suffer. But the only way we're really going to see change is by the law being changed, and it's such a simple thing. You can just change to, as I said, joint custody, and it's finished tomorrow. And again, we say thank you so much to Kishida and to Kada-san from Shiga for the work that they're doing, because they're brave in standing up and doing this. There's a whole other industry on the other side of this that claims that they're protecting the rights of children that have been removed from violent and abusive families, but there's no evidence in almost all of these cases for any form of violence or abuse. And indeed, most studies have shown that the violence and abuse that is coming is when new partners arrive, and the parents that are left behind have no way of monitoring, of no way of controlling any issues that their children may be facing, because they're prevented access. 70%, it's estimated, of Japanese parents, and including us, the foreign parents, that lose access to their children, never for the remainder of their life see these children again. And it's important to say this is not an issue just for parents who are divorced. I'm not divorced. Many other parents are not divorced. And from the day our children are taken, we're refused access. I believe Kushida-san has said previously, it takes, through the family court system, it takes 9 months, on average 9 months, for the first occasion that you can see your children. And I was told if I was lucky, within 9 months, I may be permitted a 1 or 2 hour session with the children in the court, which is monitored with a two-way glass by lawyers, by judges. And then if my children are okay with me, then I may be permitted another one of these sessions. It's inhumane. As for the local parents, the support has been great. During my detention, I received actually many letters, handwritten letters in Japanese and English from a lot of parents. I think the Japanese parents are afraid, though, to talk out, because they're worried about employment impacts. It's an issue that's not, like many things, not discussed openly and frankly in Japanese society. I'm aware of Japanese parents that this has happened to twice with separate women, that they've had 2 sets of children kidnapped. You can't imagine the pain and the heartache that this is causing people. And there's particularly on Twitter and on social media, there's a growing and vocal community. Again, Kushida is very vocal with this on Twitter, and I think people slowly are starting to understand that what's happening, because most normal Japanese people, once they understand, they're also shocked and they're surprised, and so many Japanese people have said to me, sorry, we apologize for our country, what we're doing is wrong, and we want it to change. So the vast majority of Japanese people, I'm absolutely certain, don't support the abduction and kidnapping of children. So what we need to do is keep educating people that it's happening, and stress that it's not happening just to the foreigners, it's happening mostly to the Japanese parents, and that they are the ones that ultimately have to drive the change.
About support groups from like judiciary or NGOs, or even within the government?
Within the government, there's been Kushida in particular has been wonderful. I mean, he came to visit me in Kosuge, and I think not many politicians around the world have the passion and energy for any issue that he does for this. And I should mention animals as well. He's a very big advocate for animal rights, and to find a principled politician is highly unusual on any issue. So what he's doing for the rights of children is fantastic, and there are other NGO groups both here and abroad that have been really supportive as well. I think oftentimes maybe it's a little bit fractured with one group doing here and one group doing things over there, but everybody wants the same thing, and that's all we want is the rights of the children to be respected.
Anybody? Please.
は Thanks for doing this. I'm Alistair Gale, I'm with the Wall Street Journal. I just had some follow-up questions on your experience in Kosovo. You mentioned you were moved around a lot. Was there any explanation of why that happened? And you said you made complaints. Could you talk a little bit about what you were complained about? And what kind of contact did you have with people outside the detention centre and law, etc.? Thank you.
So initially I was held in the local police detention centre, and then my understanding of the situation is once you're indicted formally, everyone is a matter of process moved to a main facility in Tokyo, that's Kosovo. And then in there you go through a kind of an interview process when you go into the facility, where you're asked a range of questions. You're asked, are you okay with society in terms of being placed not in isolation, which I said, yes, that would be very nice. The second question I was asked is, for some reason, am I interested in homosexuality? The question after that was, do I have, I don't know the nice way of saying this, basically any piercings in my genitalia. Because anyone with these kind of things are automatically placed in, I believe, in isolation as well. And then when I went into the room at Kosovo, I was told it was a kind of a training room. So there's long-serving detainees in there who coach you in, in the way to wash plates and dishes, the way to wash the toilet. If you want me to come and wash your toilet, I've become really good at doing this. And then after you do a couple of days in that room, you're moved to another room, and people were being moved constantly. So new people are coming, new people are going, but they're shuffling people from room to room. I don't know why, but I think, so it's not people are getting comfortable with each other. I made 3 separate complaints about what I explained to them was torture that was not permitted under both Amnesty International and UN regulations. And as I said before, I was told this is just my opinion, that this is Japanese law and this is the way that things are done in Japan. And if I made any further complaints about it, I was threatened with either being placed in an isolation cell or the use of a straitjacket, which was clearly explained to me in both Japanese and English.
The complaints that you made, was it about torture? Was there
correct.
But what specifically did you say amounted to torture?
So the use of 24-hour light. So you're held in a cell. The initial cell I was in, there was a window that if I asked for it to be opened, would have been opened 2 to 3 centimeters a day, but only if I asked for it. And that was the only contact you had with natural light from outside. So you're surrounded by, big kind of bar lights. At night, in the first cell, there was 4 lights only with double bars on them. So only one of those bars in one single light was dimmed. The other lights remained on. And it's impossible to sleep. I haven't slept since November. I haven't slept properly. And for my case, I was fortunate in a way to only have 45 days because, again, when I said to them, I want to complain not just for my treatment, I want to complain for everybody who's in here because it's not right and it's not acceptable to use 24-hour light. Anyone who's ever been on an international flight knows how hard that is for one day. So try doing that for 45 straight days. It's impossible to sleep. You sleep for maybe an hour at a time. You wake up, you're lucky if you get another hour. And what does that do to people mentally? It's like the night of the Walking Dead. People are walking around like zombies. You can't have clarity of thought. I met so many people, other detainees, other prisoners at Kosovo, who openly said to me, I didn't do what they're accusing me of doing, but I will confess. Because I'm told if I confess, I'll get half the sentence. If I fight it, I'll get 10 years. If I confess, I'll get 5 years, and I can't stand these facilities. So people are doing everything they can. As Carlos Ghosn mentioned in his press conference, Japan has a prosecution rate of, I think it's 99.4%. This is not normal. It's not normal in any country. Japan uses this as a way of justifying how safe and how efficient their system is. Well, I know from my experience because I was told directly by so many inmates, we didn't do what they said we did, but we're confessing just to get out. And we were told by prosecutors, if we confess, we will get a substantially lower sentence. This I was told directly by multiple prisoners that I was being held with. And during the interviews, I had, I believe it was 3 interviews with the police and 3 or 4 with the prosecutor. At not one of those interviews was a lawyer present at any point. At any point in time, which I think is also unaccepted practice.
Did you ask specifically, I want a lawyer?
No, you was told this is not happening. You just go. This is how it is. When you're moved in handcuffs. You're tethered with rope to other prisoners, anywhere up to a dozen other prisoners. So if someone moves at the back of the queue, everybody else is being moved and shuffled along with this. Several times you're being transported in a bus where the curtains were closed, so you can't see what's happening outside. I understand. I understand if I'd blown up the government building or done something. Maybe some of these things are perhaps in some way acceptable. But I was convicted of trespassing. I was held in conditions like this. I was held in facilities with all sorts of people who'd done some serious kind of crime. None of it is acceptable. But it's certainly not acceptable in this case for a father who's going to try and ascertain if his children are alive or dead. I've been asking the family court, where are my children? I want to meet my children. My family have been asking. My lawyer, myself, my family, we've sent, 30, 40, 50 faxes, emails, parcels, messages. We've received 1 or 2 responses back from lawyers with nothing, no information. I said before, I don't know if my children are alive or dead. As a father, all you want to do is know that your children are safe. The state of Japan, multiple organs of the state of Japan have failed me and have failed other parents in providing information or any access to our children. And when we try, out of frustration, to ascertain this information, we're the ones that are arrested and detained and placed in appalling conditions and tortured.
Are there any more member of the press who wants to have a question? Because otherwise I will open it to just present people. Anybody can ask questions. Please, Vincent. You are somehow a colleague of him.
Hey Scott, yeah. Thanks for doing that today. So my name is Vincent Fischer. My kids were abducted 18 months ago. I don't know where they are. Same situation as you. I went to the police station 4 times to claim for child abduction, child abuse with evidences. I went to the public prosecutor in Kasumigaseki twice, who refused to conduct any investigation or give any suit to the case. Do you think that the treatment you got for merely trespassing would have the consequences would have been the same if you had just been trespassing and not trying to look for your children? In other words, do you think that you've been treated in a certain way to try to silence you and set an example for any other parents who would try to find out about their children's well-being?
Yeah, I don't know. That's probably not for me to say. I don't know who was behind who was behind this. It's worth pointing out though that that 3 days after I was detained, I managed to pass the key to my apartment to a friend of mine who entered the apartment, and when she opened the door, the apartment was completely trashed. There was rubbish, garbage all over the floor. Multiple items had been removed from the house. She went back 2 days later and everything was gone. All of my children's belongings were removed from the house. My children's books, their desks, their chairs, their toys, all of their photographs were gone. Boxes containing the little memories and things of them were all gone. The vast majority of my property was gone. I've managed very kindly through my friend to borrow a suit, and I bought this yesterday from Uniqlo. But outside of this, I have almost nothing. The fridge was taken, the washing machine was taken, the television was taken. Almost all of my property was taken from my apartment. I don't know who came into my apartment, but there's only 2 people that had a key to that apartment, me and my wife. And there was no sign of forced entry. Someone came into my apartment 3 days after I was detained, and I want to know how they knew I was detained. Who from the police is informing people that I was detained? I made a complaint immediately to the police that everything has been removed from my apartment, and I want to make a complaint of theft. I was told that we will do nothing for you. My children were taken, my children's memories were taken, and now everything has been taken personally from me. So now this ordeal for me is over. It's not over for the children, but now I have to start again. I have nothing. And this, this all as a result of trying to find children who were taken from me against my will. So, Vincent, the same as you. I went several times, in my case, more than 4 times, many more than 4 times, and I was told that we won't do anything for you. This is a simple family matter. It's a simple family dispute. So if it's a simple family matter and a simple family dispute, why, when I go to the apartment of the parents-in-law who are family, why am I arrested? Why are they supporting one element of the family, but they're not supporting the other element of the family? Things are not equal. Things are not just. And as you know, so many parents, we go straight away. We go to the police. I went with a copy of the law. This is the law of Japan. You must investigate. We're told, no, go away. We'll not investigate. Go away, go away, go away. A dozen times, more than a dozen times. I went day after day after day after day. Nothing. Just go away, go away, go away. It's not, it's not acceptable, you know. There's a law in place. The police are obliged to investigate this law. We know of other cases of European parents who have gone, one guy in particular who did 7 months in solitary confinement in Kosovo for attempted kidnapping of his children that were already kidnapped. How can you attempt to kidnap somebody who's already been kidnapped? It doesn't make any sense.
Can I just ask?
Come to because we are taping it.
Okay. I see. Could you just talk a little bit more about what happened when you were going to your in-laws' apartment? At what stage were you? Who asked you to leave? What happened there? And I understand you were actually arrested a month after that. Okay. Why was that?
So I'd gone to the apartment a couple of times before and a couple of times after the day that I actually entered into the apartment. I should say, when I entered the apartment, this was the time of the typhoon. I don't know if my children are alive or dead at this point, and the only information I have about my children, I don't know where they are, I don't know where they're living or anything. The only link I have to them is the apartment of the parents-in-law who were 100 meters down the road from my apartment. So I'd rung on the intercom multiple times. There was not an answer on any occasion, but it has a camera, so I'm sure that they could have seen that it was me. And then, as to why it took a month, I have no idea. I mean, they had a search warrant when they came into the house, and they said that they were looking for the clothes that I was wearing on the moment that I entered into the apartment. So, whether they needed time to execute that search warrant or whatever investigation they do, but what I would like to see the police do is the amount of effort that they've put into investigating a 2-minute trespassing, which I didn't talk to anybody, I didn't touch anything, I didn't damage anything. I went to outside of the apartment to look if my children's umbrellas or shoes or anything are there, and I immediately left. It's no more than 1 or 2 minutes in the thing. So the amount of effort and work that they've put into that, they could have put the same amount of effort and work into investigating the claims that I'd made of kidnapping and abduction, but which they refused to do. And what I want them to do now is to investigate equally the theft and removal of all of my and my children's property from my apartment, which I'd been told during my detention that they wouldn't help with. So it's now time for these police to show that they treat every case and they treat everybody fairly and equally. And if they're going to investigate the trespassing, then I want them to investigate also why 90% of the things from my house were removed.
May I ask you, under whose name is your apartment rent?
It was under my wife's brother, under his name, and I received a letter during my detention from a lawyer on his behalf, saying that the contract on the apartment has been cancelled. So somebody came in, they removed all the items from the house, and in addition to that, the contractor was cancelled. Additionally to that, I was told that somebody contacted all the utility companies, the gas and the electricity
that were
that was solely under my name, and had all of those items cancelled. So I don't know who did it, but people can make their own conclusions as to that somebody has come into my apartment, removed everything. They've also cancelled all the utilities, and then they've cancelled the contract. So if anyone has a cheap apartment they're looking to rent,
so where do you live now?
I'm in the market. I'm staying with a friend for now, and then I need to find a place. You have a spare room, Pierre? No?
No, I'm looking for a house.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm a friend of Scott and the director of the Commission on the Rights of Children in Japan. And I want to ask you, what made your wife the abduction, and including the situation before the abduction, the change of life in the family, like that, please.
I have no idea, and that's an issue for her to talk about. And in many ways, it's not particularly relevant to today, because relationships break down for all sorts of reasons all around the world. But what doesn't happen is that children are then removed against the will of one parent. I'm sure people, it's not just women, it's men, people leave, relationships finish, it's normal all around the world. In many ways, it's a positive thing for Japanese society that finally the divorce rate is increasing and getting to what it is in other nations, because for a long time here, particularly women, didn't feel that they had the right to leave relationships, and that's a positive thing. Finally, that if people are unhappy and they do want to do divorce and move on, I think it's a positive thing for Japanese society that's happening. What's not positive is that the children are being used as a pawn in this situation. I think in many cases, in my experience in Japan, children are not viewed almost not as a human. In this case, they're almost viewed as a marital asset, as property to be removed and distributed as necessary. Also in Japanese society, in my opinion, one of the main issues of this is the korseki, the registration document. So as soon as a divorce is finalized, one of the parents is removed from the document. I mean, you're obliterated. You're no longer a parent. If the person subsequently remarries, the new partner has the chance to officially become a father or a mother of your children, and you have no rights. It's not normal in most countries, and this is why we keep coming back to the same thing. It's just so simple. Just change the law and make joint custody, and then none of us have to be here. I don't want to be here. Nobody wants Vincent and Tommaso and all these other people that have been involved. And the Kenjiro, the organization that you're involved with, has also been very good in doing a lot of research into this issue. So we want the family court to move things quickly. It's not good enough 9 months, on average, for someone to see their children. It's not good enough for 70% of parents to never, ever, for the rest of their life, see their children. It's an abuse. It's a human rights abuse against children. And in my opinion, 100,000 children a year, it's one of the biggest human rights abuses anywhere on the planet. That 100,000 children are being denied basic fundamental human rights by multiple organs of the Japanese state.
Let me ask you something. Your wife asked for divorce, but the divorce has not been granted yet, right?
That's
so
correct.
You are still discussing it.
That's correct.
At what level? Did you already have any hearing, official hearing?
Yeah. So in Japan, when somebody files for divorce and that's contested, there's an automatic mediation.
You contested.
Yeah. Because I want to contest it, because I don't want to lose access to the children, although I haven't had any access. So it's an automatic mediation thing with an undetermined period. So as far as I know, this could go forever, this thing. So approximately every 2 months, you go to the family court, you have some kind of discussion. For the first 2 of those, my wife didn't even appear. As a result, me and my lawyer placed an emergency return order, an emergency custody order to have the children returned to the apartment. The hearing was set for that, and neither my wife nor her lawyer even bothered to appear at that hearing. They didn't even show to the court. In any other country, this is contempt of court, and the case is immediately dismissed. 5 minutes later, the judge says, no, it's finished. Somebody from the court, I believe, went to talk to my children in the house, I don't know where, in the house that they'd been abducted to, in the presence of both my wife and her mother. And on the basis of this, we had another hearing. It was no more than 5 minutes. Again, she did not even bother to turn up to the court hearing. So we are not able to ask any questions. I was not interviewed. I was not questioned. And the case is simply after 2-3 minutes, no, we find no reason to have the children returned. Okay, on what basis you find no reason to have the children returned? Because you've not spoken to me. You've spoken to the children in a place that they've been abducted to, in the presence of people who've removed children against my will. It's not the standard, it's not accepted practice in any nation on earth. But the family court is using this as a justification not to return them. Even she hasn't turned to court. The lawyer has not even appeared in court. It's not acceptable.
One other question. Did your wife, before or after leaving the house, file any domestic violence against you?
No, not publicly. No. There's been, I think in most cases, in 70-80%, there are some form of domestic violence allegations level. That's never been.
But she never filed. You have not be prosecuted.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
No.
I think it was a question there.
Hi Scott, I'm Rupert Wingfield-Hayes from the BBC. I was going to ask about the koseki because you sort of covered it, I guess, but I mean, I'm just curious because I have Japanese children, and I know that when we first came to Japan, my children are now grown up, but when we first came to Japan...
And they're not abducted? That's
No, they live... No, the full burden is more... No. When we first came, it was difficult to get your children registered under my name, so I'm wondering whether your wife registered your children under her name, and whether that might have affected your case in the eyes of the law once they'd gone, because they were already registered by her. And the second question is, now you have a criminal conviction, albeit for trespassing, how is that going to affect your ability to have visitation rights in the future?
Thanks, man. With the koseki, I think it may be changing this year or next year, but I think the children cannot have foreign names, right? On the koseki is my understanding of it. So the children were both born in Australia with my surname, but on the koseki they're listed under her name. And it's also my understanding that already, certainly in the family court documents, their children have been reverted back to using her name, which is also something that I've made repeated complaints against, because in their school, they went to a local school here, if they go to the doctor or any form of society where you need to use a name, they use my name. And now, after they've been removed from me without my consent, their name has immediately been changed. So this is also, as I say, their culture has been saved, but their identity has been stolen. So they were also removed from their school 2 days after. I went to visit the school to speak to the teachers, to speak to the principal of the school, and they said, your wife called one time, but we haven't heard from her in weeks. We haven't heard from the children in weeks. And I said to the teachers, is this normal? You're not concerned that the children haven't been coming to school? And I'm going on repeated times, and they said, no, we only have a responsibility to ensure that the children are studying. That's why it's pretty obvious that they're not studying, because they're not in school. So it was a failure, from the school.
Was it a Japanese school or?
It was a local Japanese school. So also how you can change people's names and identity even before a divorce has been completed is, I think it's outrageous. I'll get to the visa thing in a second as well. But the other thing I want to raise is that in many of the cases, and this is what we want to do, is we want to educate other parents, foreign parents, Japanese parents, because I'm aware of so many cases of people using the system of single custody as a threat. When relationships a fracture. I know so many cases where the husband or the wife says, if you don't do what I want, I'll take the Japanese husband, their mother or father has said to the foreign father or the Japanese on Japanese, if you don't do what I want, I will take the children. I will kidnap the children and I will get custody of them. I know of one case of an Australian mother and a husband whose kids were abducted for months in the build-up. She was told in front of the children that I will take you and I will get custody from the Japanese court. They will give me custody. And the children started to repeat it. If there's a disagreement with the mother, hey, we'll do what we want, because if not, my father, he will take me and we will get custody and you'll never see us. These are common stories and common discussions where the threat of this is hanging over people. So, you know, when people read or hear of my story, I'm sure there's so many people in a similar situation. They think, yeah, if I do one thing wrong, you know, if I do something wrong, my kids are going to be taken from me. And in Japan, it's okay. Nothing is done. The police refuse to investigate this. The family court takes so long to have any form of action. So you've got so many people living in fear in relationships because they know that this is a threat that can happen to them. With the visa, I still have a couple of years remaining on my visa, but as you said, because I've got a criminal conviction, I don't know the status of my visa, what happens after that. I assume it's going to be difficult for me to stay in Japan, and it's going to be very difficult for me to see my children. So, you know, I'm sure there's some motivation behind all of that, but yeah, all we can do is just keep fighting to see our children and you know, just give the message that we never abandoned them, that we never gave up on them, that we love them, and we're doing everything we can to be reunited with them, because it's important, as Pio touched on, the concept of parental alienation, which I've spoken to the mediators and the judge in my case, and they're completely unaware of it. So they think if, you know, after a year or 2 years or whatever the situation is, in most cases that I'm aware of, the children turn around and say, hey, we don't love the mother or the father. Sure. We don't want to be reunited with the mother and the father. And these are the cases of children who, in many cases, were abducted when they were young, when they were babies. And after 3-4 years, they say, hey, we don't want to meet our mother or our father. Well, how do they know? Because they don't have a relationship with this. And the courts are routinely accepting this as justification for failure to provide any form of visitation, which is a basic fundamental human rights. So we need Japanese justices, Japanese judges, the Japanese judiciary, we need them to be aware of the concept of parental alienation, that when small children, and even older children, after months and years of being separated from a parent and being victimized and abused, and the WHO last year, as I said, recognized parental alienation as a disease which leads to long-term damage. We need Japan to understand and recognize that this is what's happening to children. And what is the future for Japanese society if they keep doing this, 90% of it, to their own people?
Scott, we are running out of time. I just wanted to ask you, your kids are, I think, 11 and 8?
Yeah.
Okay, so kids are really fast users of you know,
yeah,
YouTube and so on.
Yeah.
This is going on YouTube right now.
Great.
There are chances that he may, at least the eldest one, may run into this.
Yeah.
You want to say something?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. For Hinata and for Harugo, I love you very much, and yeah, want to see you as soon as I can.
Thank you.
And if anyone has questions for Kushida-san, it's very important to hear the
as I said at the beginning, Kushida-sensei is here, and all journalists are welcome to ask him direct question. Kishida-sensei, ちょっと言っていいですか？多分質問直接聞きたい。はい、よろしくお願いします。それじゃあ、Thank you very much.
For sure. Thank you.